All right, so today we're in one of our labs at Methodist University. I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. John Fox. I'll let him kind of introduce himself here in a second. And one of the things that John and I have been discussing over the past couple of days is this concept of, why do you train? And one of the reasons why we've been discussing this concept is we're faced with this unprecedented challenge right now of maintaining motivation to continue to put in the miles, both on the bike, maybe on the run. Unfortunately, not many of us have the ability to go to the pool or to be in an open water setting, but to continue to train on a day in and day out basis. But the question is, for what? A lot of times when we're training for a specific race. We're training because we're part of a training group, or we're preparing in an off season for an approaching racing season. And really right now we're met with a lot of uncertainty. Is the race going to move forward as planned? Is it going to be canceled? Is it going to be postponed? We don't know how long this is going to take place. And so while we're in the midst of this kind of coronavirus pandemic, we thought it would be helpful to kind of give you a window into our conversation. We've been having this conversation for the past couple of days on some of the runs that we've been going on. And one of the things that we've kind of boiled it down to are these two categories of intrinsic and extrinsic factors that contribute to kind of answering the bigger question of, why the heck do we train? But before we do that, I'm going to let Dr. Fox introduce himself to all of you. So, John, tell us something about yourself.
My name is John Fox. I'm an assistant professor at Methodist University, and I'm just a biomechanist, but more than that, I like to run.
So give us a little bit of a backstory as far as your running career, because you've ran all the way from middle school to high school. You ran collegiately. Give us some of your times, maybe just so individuals have an idea of kind of your athletic prowess in like the 5 and 10K.
Yeah, so I guess primarily I ran cross country, and I went to a smaller college. There wasn't a track and field program. So 8K cross country, I finished up running about 25:20, and for the 5K on the road, I ran 15:09, and I've done a 420 mile. So those are kind of my PRs, so to speak. I don't do long stuff like triathletes, so.
In short though, John's no slouch when it comes to running, and he's a fantastic training partner. But one of the reasons why we've been discussing this is, here's a little known fact on John. Outside of a local race called the Firecracker 4-miler that takes place on July 4th, how many races do you run in a single year, John?
Zero races.
So this is intriguing to me, right? Because I work with individuals on a day in and day out basis who constantly have a race on the calendar, and that's a good thing. I'm in the same boat as you. In fact, John and I kind of laugh about this because I typically am looking down the road at the race calendar and figuring out what's the next race that I'm going to jump into. Meanwhile, John's going, I'm training for the Firecracker, and that's kind of it. And so this is interesting because then this kind of gets into our whole discussion of these things that we were going to talk about called extrinsic factors. And just for the sake of our discussion, we're going to define these as things that are external to ourselves, or we might say we identify with these things. What's interesting about this is John and I are really the comparison and contrasting elements here. John's not registered for a race. Outside of myself, he's not really training with many partners or groups. And so he doesn't really have a sense of community. He's not trying to qualify for Kona or for Boston or kind of accumulate these AG top 3s or personal bests. And John,
Clearly,
as he will say, clearly is not concerned about attaining a certain look. Sometimes we think of training as being a mode by which we can attain a certain body image or an aesthetic. But this may be true for some of you. When you look at training, when you look at putting in the long hours, it may be because you want to hit a PR or a personal best. Maybe you want to eclipse a sub 3-hour marathon or a sub 4-hour marathon. Maybe you finally want to get your BQ, where you want to hit Ironman all-world status, right? We have the gold, silver, and bronze levels. And really when we think about these are all things that we identify with. These are all things that are extrinsic. The problem is, what happens when COVID pandemic hits? What happens even when an injury hits that may sideline you from training? Well, when those things happen, these extrinsic factors, they go away. Races are canceled. We have to engage in social distancing, which means we're no longer with groups. Our sense of community may diminish. Yeah, we have online capacities, but getting together with an individual may diminish. Boston's been rescheduled. I've had several athletes who have worked tirelessly to qualify for Boston, and now it's been rescheduled. Who knows what's going to happen as the continuation of this race season develops? What about body image? If you're not able to get to the gym, you're not able to participate in kind of these group training rides, runs, or what have you, does the aesthetics start to take a different view? And so John and I have kind of been discussing this, and we've said, well, what about the intrinsic factors? Things that we might be defined by. And I'm going to let John kind of wrap your mind around this whole kind of idea of identify with or define by, because he really helped me to kind of understand this whole comparison and contrasting piece.
Yeah, so several years ago, my dad had a transition in his job. So he went from a job that arguably he really enjoyed and wanted to have, and took a job that he didn't enjoy so much. And so in a conversation with him about it, I kind of inquired, like, well, how are you doing this? And he said to me that he goes to work so that he can go home and be the real Tom Fox. And so he kind of shifted the framework I was thinking about in terms of career, and said, I'm not defined by my job, right? I'm defined by who I am at home, or something of that nature. And so, so that kind of got me thinking about intrinsic versus extrinsic factors in training, right? I can be defined, where I can view myself as being defined by these external things, or I can view myself as being defined by some of these internal things. At the end of the day, kind of what we're arguing is that you can't be defined by these. These are just things that you identify with. And the reason you can't be identified, or you can't be defined by them, is because they are external to yourself. So.
Yeah, and so as we kind of move into this time of dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, where we're sidelined from maybe our normal training protocols, sidelined from races, these are some things that we've kind of come up with for our why. And this might look different for you. I'd encourage you to take out a scratch piece of paper, get a pen and pencil out, and write down some of these things that exist outside of what you identify with, but more what you define yourself with. And so these are the things that we would define ourselves by. When we train, when John goes out and trains, it's not for a race. It's because he wants to be durable and he wants to be adaptable. Durable people are harder to kill. And I don't mean that kind of in a morbid way, but when you focus on your health and wellness, your overall ecosystem is optimized. You're more likely to weather the storms of a virus or a pandemic, or maybe even a natural disaster, right? And in doing so, you become far more adaptable. Man, endurance athletes are super adaptable. They go out and they train, and they train over various distances and over varying terrain. They engage in endurance activity, but also anaerobic strength-based activity. That's fantastic. Maybe it's being an example to your family. I know this is true for myself. I have a couple girls. John has a couple girls. All of them are younger. And so one of the things that we're doing as parents is we're setting an example for them. We're showing them how to take care of their overall bodies, how to take care of their ecosystem. That goes all the way from nutrition to activity and exercise to mental training. And there's a whole wide range of things that we could go down with regards to that. And so one of the ways that we've kind of thought about this is we're cultivating behaviors. Much like a farmer goes out, they plant the seed and they cultivate. We don't know what the crop is going to be. I can't look into the future and determine kind of what's going to happen with my girls. Instead, I can create an environment where that seed that I've planted is optimized. I'm making sure there aren't weeds that are growing up. I'm making sure it has adequate sunshine and adequate nutrition, water, and all the other nutrients it needs to grow, right? I'm cultivating behaviors of exercise, health, and wellness. And training makes us gritty. right? We're less likely to kind of give up when the going gets tough. Right now, the going is really tough. This pandemic is not easy, right? And kind of coming full circle now to what John said, it gives us purpose. Passion, by the way, we could talk for hours about passion, but I'm gonna argue that purpose is not passion, right? Passion dwindles, right? Think of a relationship that you've had. You've gone into the relationship, you're really, really passionate, and then over time, that passion begins to fade. What happens when that passion fades? There has to be an underpinning, a foundation that exists. That's purpose. Ultimately, you train so you can be the real you. So you can be the real you for your partner or your spouse, for your kids, for your family, your extended family, for your community, for your friends. Right now, we all need each other. It's kind of this paradox in the fact that we're socially distancing, but as communities, we're relying on each other for support. And so I would argue that why do you train? It's because you define yourself by these things, and ultimately it's because you have a purpose. It's so that you can train to be the real you. And so if you're kind of wondering, man, where do I go from here? We could take all these things away. The races could go away, the group runs could go away, the qualifications could go away, and at least for myself, and I know for John, we would still set the alarm, we would still show up for the training run or the ride or the swim, whatever it may be, because ultimately, we're not defined by these things. We're defined by something more. We're defined by these intrinsic factors and the fact that we want to be our best selves for those that are closest to us. So, a couple thoughts for you today on why do you train. Get out a piece of paper, grab a pencil. Over the weekend, think about this. Engage your family. Talk to your training partners. This is a healthy conversation to have right now because when these things go away, we got to fall back on something. Ultimately, this is the foundation of training principles.
Can I add an illustration?
Please.
All right, so part of this idea of you train so that you can be the real you is this notion of, for example, I've never been defined as an angry person, right? Some people have said that I look angry, but no one has ever said, John, you are an angry person. However, you should note that when I have gone through an extensive amount of time not training, my wife will say, you're acting kind of pissed off all the time. You know, maybe you need to go for a run. And so one of the reasons that I train is so that I don't go home pissed off and I can be the real me at home, which is not an angry John Fox. And to me, that really outweighs some of the extrinsic things like a Kona or a Boston or even the firecracker 4 mile. So
Hopefully this gives you something to chew on. Have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and have a good afternoon.